When it comes down to human rights, America has always had one of the worst records on the planet. They just know how to fluff it up and camouflage it and make you believe that it's really good when it's really bad. And they always want to give you an illusion of something instead of making it reality. So it should come to no shock that human rights has come into question in America by the UN. So this came out in Politico, July 1st, 2020. Human rights group turned their sights on Trump's America. And, the US, as usual, one of these places that want to point out what's wrong with how treatment is done in somebody else's country, but want to ignore the treatment that they put on the Black community. And they have always done this, ladies and gentlemen, for centuries. For centuries. Okay. And then when it looks too bad, then they'll try to, put a band-aid on it and then come back out on the world stage and try to perpetrate a fraud again. So the Trump administration was in panic mode. The United Nations Human Rights Council was debating launching a special investigation of racism in America after the killing of George Floyd, a Black man who died in police custody. The United States was determined to derail any such probe. That the Trump administration cared so much was surprising. It had quit the council 2 years ago, calling it an anti-Israel cesspool of political bias and denouncing its membership for including human rights abusing countries. So the United Nations was supposed to not have any countries with human rights being an issue, according to the US. Maybe it's because the US got issues too. Publicly, US officials kept their cool as the mid-June discussions played out. Behind the scenes, however, the State Department was scrambling to avert a public relations disaster, dispatching its diplomats to pull strings and call in favors. And of course they did the usual thing, deny that there's any problems in the US and, oh, let this go. You got to let this go. Well, that's the problem. It's been let go, y'all, for 5 centuries. That's the problem. That's why we're in the situation we're in today. America's falling apart. And there's a reason why America's falling apart. See, all of that judgment is finally catching up to you. I know you're going to deny it and say, that ain't it, that ain't it. Yeah, that's it. Okay, the pressure worked. The 47-member council didn't order a US-focused probe, instead requesting a broader report on anti-Black racism worldwide. You should have just stayed on your course. You would have found plenty wrong with America. Plenty. One thing about America, like I told y'all, when it comes down to social issues, America has always done very poorly. Because, see, they only want to cater to one group and fulfill the needs of one group while holding everybody else at bay. And this is how this entire country has been ran. And now it's all crumbling right in their faces, and there's nothing they can do about it. They can't go out in the streets and shoot COVID. They can't arrest COVID. They can't go out there and protest COVID. They can't do nothing. And this is one of many things that's going to happen to the US, and it's going to be completely out of their reach to do anything about it, just like COVID. So, ladies and gentlemen, many of the international activist groups and institutions are increasingly focused on the United States as a villain and not a hero on the subject of human rights. While the US has never fully escaped such scrutiny, considered the post 9/11 fury over torture, Guantanamo Bay, drone strikes, former officials and activists say that under President Donald Trump, American domestic strife is rising at an unusual level of alarm alongside US actions on the global stage. Some groups also flag what they say is an eroding democracy in a country that has long styled itself as a beacon of freedom. And that is so fake right there. Everybody in America is not free. Okay, they like to put that out there and give you the illusion of that, but everybody in America is not free and never have been free. They don't have that kind of history of everyone in the whole country being free. They don't have that history. It don't exist. So, ladies and gentlemen, they want to rewrite the meaning of what human rights mean, of course, you know. And the US is the last one on this planet that should be rewriting what human rights is. Get real, okay? All right. So, former US officials say that all above what has put Americans' human rights record in question is Trump's disregard for the issue and his affinity for authoritarian leaders. When Trump has condemned human rights abuses, it's generally been in select situations that cost him little political capital, or when it can be bolstered to his electoral base, like Iran and Venezuela. Mm-mm-mm. The Trump factor is huge. If not, it's probably the biggest factor in a battered U.S. reputation, said David Kramer, a former Assistant Secretary for Human Rights in the George W. Bush administration. People advocating and fighting for democracy, human rights, and freedom around the world are disillusioned by the US government and don't view the current administration as a true partner. So, ladies and gentlemen, they know there's problems here, but I guess the US have enough money to pay people off not to do these investigations on it. Over the long term, the nation will need to take steps to end the police brutality and militarization, as well as structural racial inequality, if it wants to avoid similar future crises. The ICG said. At present, however, what the country's leadership most need to do is insist that those culpable for Floyd's killing are brought to justice, stand in support of those local officials and community leaders who are calling for calm and reform, abandon its martial rhetoric, and stop making the situation worse. Okay, so Rob Malley, ICG president and CEO, was an aide to former President Barack Obama, but said the idea for the statement came from colleagues. The ICG decided it saw a confluence of factors in America that it sees in far more troubled countries. One appeared to be growing militarization of the police. Another was the seemingly politicizing of the military. Also key, some US political leaders, including Trump, seem determined to exploit racial divisions instead of pushing for unity. The ICG is now debating whether to launch a program that focuses on U.S. domestic issues in a systematic way, Malley said. Malley stressed that the U.S. administration, Republican and Democrat, all had credibility gaps when it came to promoting human rights while protecting U.S. interests. Obama, for instance, was criticized for authoring drone strikes against militants that often killed civilians. But under Trump, those incredibly gaps have turned into canyons, Malley said. I think there's a difference with this administration for whom human rights seem to be threatened purely as a transitional currency, he said. In 2019, Freedom House released a special essay titled The Struggle Comes Home: Attacks on Democracy in the United States. The Washington based NGO, which received a bulk of its funding from the US government, was established in 1941 to fight fascism. The report, which ranks how free countries are using various indicators described in decline in US democracy that predated Trump and was fueled in part by political polarization. Freedom House warned, however, that Trump was accelerating it. No president in living memory has shown less respect for U.S. democracy tenets, norms, and principles, the report said. Trump has assailed essential institutions and traditions, including the separation of powers, a free press, an independent judiciary, and delivery of justice, safeguards against corruption, and most disturbingly, the legitimacy of elections. Other groups have slammed the Trump administration's dismantling of much of the U.S. refugee resettlement program, its erosion to accept asylum seekers, its travel bans on people from several Muslim majority countries, and its treatment of migrants in general. Groups like Amnesty International US Selection have subsequently increased their work on such migration issues under Trump, including hiring more staff and conducting more research, missions along the US Mexican border. Amnesty is one of the few international human rights organizations that has a problematic focus on the United States. You know, what's that saying that old people would say, y'all, years ago? All that glitters is not gold. That's how I see the US. The US is all shiny and glittery, and it looks like it may be a promising place. But when you get an up close look, it's real ugly and filthy and dirty and riddled with racism. But y'all, please tell me what you think about this article on human rights. And we know the US is a huge violator of that. And they show us every day. Every day in the news, we can find some article of some unarmed Black person being beaten or killed, okay, or some cop getting caught on tape lying. Okay, this is the kind of stuff you can definitely count on up in here, and then you have those that tell you, well, if you don't like it, you can leave. The irony in that. If we say that back to them, y'all, they really can't leave. Europe don't want them. Peace, family.